Tarana, how would you explain to someone what venture debt was in 2017? Even today, I don't think many people understand. But in 2017, when most people were still trying to understand what venture capital is, you were talking about venture debt, right? Which is like, and to many, right? And I maybe present company included, it was like, how do you trust the balance sheets that they can even manage this kind of debt? Even if it is 1 crore, how are they going to pay it back? These are inherently loss-making businesses.
I think venture debt, it was a little bit of a mind shift change that I had to make, because on the equity side, and especially early stage equity, it's a 0 or 100. You're
Correct.
betting that this thing is going to go to 100. You're not betting for a 10 or 20 or either, right? Or even like, okay, let me get my capital back. It's like all or nothing. 2, I think when you're on the equity side, it's a lot more strategic long term with the founder and the company. You're literally married to it. On the debt side, you're thinking, it's a little more thinking, okay, 0 to, will this company be around for the next 5 years? Because my debt needs to be paid back. And will my debt be paid back in the next, because our tenor of the loan is anywhere from 18 months to 36 months. So that's my first sort of train of thought that I have to make, that, okay, will I get my capital back, my debt back? 2, I mean, at least on the early stage side, and not so much for growth, you forget what a balance sheet is. I mean, I remember there were companies, even in our portfolio at Seed Fund, where actually they were not burning that much on the P&L, but they had working capital cycles where the cash was going, and we were missing that as investors at times. And even though I did accounting in undergrad and had done banking, I had forgotten what a balance sheet was. So I think that was the other piece that I had to sort of go back.
So critical though, right? I think over a period of time, and I think maybe over the last 3 or 4 years more so, it's you start to understand what working capital, how difficult and important, I mean, how difficult it is for a business
to manage,
and secondly, how important it is, right? Because you can have fantastic, like you said, fantastic P&L numbers, but then you start scratching to the numbers and realizing, operating cash is still negative. Because you're not getting paid on time, or you're not getting paid.
Finance 101, cash is king. So I think that was the second sort of reminder. And the way to look at venture debt is not that it's a replacement for equity. Companies still have to raise equity. It is more like a top up to your equity round. So a lot of the startups, unfortunately, will not get bank debt because they're not profitable. They don't have hard assets. Banks don't know how to underwrite them. So they say, okay, we cannot give these companies debt. But if it's a brick and mortar business or a business that has a working capital requirement, seems like a waste that you use equity money for it, which is where venture debt plays a role. So we're sort of, okay, what we say is, but we're not a bridge loan either. We're not something where we'll come in with a company with 4 months runway and say, okay, between 2 equity rounds, let me raise some debt. It is basically, it's more to be used as a top-up to equity round where it helps the founders and other stakeholders like small funds like us not to dilute, right? Or dilute less, because it says, okay, let's use this debt money. We have equity. We'll be operational for the next year or 18 months. Let's raise some debt to either accelerate our growth, or if we have this working capital or capex requirement where we can use it. So
you said a very key word, which I think most founders need to understand. You said underwrite. Right. And I don't think many founders understand what underwriting is, especially from a debt perspective. Right?
So when we underwrite, so as equity guys, you're underwriting the business, the business model, the vision, how big is the TAM, and we're doing all that as well. But there I'm piggybacking a lot on the equity guys. What we follow very closely is the cash flows, ideally month-on-month cash flows, because I want to see that this company knows that it's going to be around for the next year or 18 months, where they're managed to sort of build this business, and that they'll have the ability to raise the next round of equity. Because the longer they stay around, that's the way they'll repay my debt. Because ultimately I'm debt. I have to be paid back.
That's true. And that's the important part, right? That you have to be paid back. The venture capital guys can write it. They can write off things, and because they have their moonshots, right? If you, in a venture capital portfolio, out of 10 or 20 companies, even if you have one that takes off with 100x, it's literally going to pay everything else off.
But here, that doesn't happen.
You're never going to get, because even if the company, and that's the benefit, and maybe the curse of venture debt is that on at least for the founder, you can pay back this money and you're done, right? And that dilution is saved. But at the same time, if you don't pay back this money, right, then they can exercise, because the debt guy gets paid first on anything. And for you have to make sure, that's why you were saying underwriting, that they pay you back.
I mean, make sure and all that. Ultimately, we're all part of the ecosystem. We do try to work with our founders when things are tough. So we're not loan sharks either.
Yeah.
Maybe we should be at times, but we're not. I think it's balancing. Ultimately, everyone has to coexist. Where I think founders need to realize is that this is debt. It needs to be repaid. And so they have to think about it responsibly. And even my peers, and including us, we're guilty. Sometimes we do push debt on companies when they shouldn't be taking debt. And I think that's what everyone needs to sort of recognize. When should the company raise debt? How much debt? Sometimes we get carried away. And I understand founders sometimes are desperate for capital. But I think they need to recognize that I need to fund this with equity or I need to fund it with debt.
I also think sometimes, and I've heard this before, simply maybe 12 months ago when money was flowing so quickly and so fast, thick and fast, that most of the founders started treating venture debt also as venture capital.
Yes.
Right? As though that, they could also put that money to work in very long-term projects or very long-term expenses, or even towards marketing and branding, which is going to take a long time to pay back.
Yeah.
Far before that, you need to be paid back as well.
Some did. I won't say a lot. And this was, I don't think, again, this was even just the market dynamics. I think this was just everyone, just the gold rush, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, capital was cheap. And so everyone was sort of
and
being irresponsible.
And there is a
including us, capital providers on the equity or debt side.